Start.
Okay.
All right.
You play on the video button?
And,
Thank you for watching our live stream today.
okay.
I hope that you were blessed and enjoyed today's
Hi, good morning, and welcome again to another in our series with the Sabbath School lesson. We're doing this 3 months, themes in the Gospel of John. For those who are joining us online, I'd like you to remember that you can actually give us your comments in the chat on YouTube, and we will try to incorporate them in our lesson study and our discussion. With me today, to help with this lesson, and this lesson today is a testimony of the Samaritans. We have Michael Davis from Atlanta. Hi, Mike.
Good morning.
And we have Luc Astier. He's here with me
Morning.
from France. Okay. And myself, Mark, I'll be your tech host for today. So thank you again. And as we are going through this lesson, we found quite a few things. Again, we know that the lesson is thematic, right? And we want to make sure that everyone understands the process. It's not just going to be, we move from one thing to the other, where we just go from one text to the other. We actually, it's being done thematically. And so here we are, the Gospel of John. And then we actually have with the apps that we use just to access our software, just access the lesson study. This is I always tell you to talk about this because I use it, and it helps you get connected to our lessons no matter where you go, because it's on your phone. It is beautiful. It accesses all the lesson studies, including kids' lesson studies and stuff like that. And we're looking at today's one, which is the testimony of the Samaritans. So, as we know, we're here, but we studied last week testimonies from other places, right? We had testimonies from the disciples, testimonies from the disciples of John, testimonies from other places, which are what? People that could talk about it, people that themselves saw. And we discovered, or we also discussed, that an eyewitness account of things is probably the best thing you could ever have, right? Circumstantial evidence, you have to build that up. Any other evidence can be refuted, but eyewitness account is one of the best. And so it looks as if the thematic process here with this lesson is going through eyewitness accounts primarily. Correct. And so we do this, but let's look at the lesson for today. Let's look at what we have for today's lesson, the verse that we will be using, which is in the testimony of the Samaritans. It is John 4:42, which is, then they said to the woman, now we believe, not because of what you said, for we ourselves have heard him, and we know that this is indeed the Christ, the Savior of the world. That is the crux of what we're going to be discussing today. Right?
Interesting statement. Jesus would have liked this statement to come from the Jews, right?
And also the statement packs a lot into it, because it actually it does indicate that, and this is a Samaritan woman, this is the people of Samaria, it does indicate that they were also looking for a Messiah, a Christ. So there is some link there. They're not just pagans. This is something different. So why don't we look at some of the history of the area And how is it that, because we understand that there weren't good neighbors. I mean, the Jews did not like the Samaritans. The Samaritans, thought they were looked down upon. And the Jews went so far as to walk around Samaria. They'd rather take the long route around in the desert rather than passing through Samaria. True?
True, that's correct.
Yes.
How did
correct.
it get to this point?
But I think we need to look at the history, because 700 years before,
Mhm.
the nation of Israel was divided into two sub-nation. I don't know how I should say, the king of the north and the king of the south.
Right.
And the king of the north was invaded by the Assyrians, and
Mhm.
the Assyrian strategy when they were taking over a new land was to exfiltrate a number of people from that land.
Mhm.
They started first by the intelligentsia, the most prominent people, but also they would bring people from the other region that they were dominating in order to
Right.
mix population and to
Mhm.
get better control on this. And which means that this land, which was invaded by the Assyrians in 722, was actually populated with a mix of Jews and people that brought their own religion with different race. So this became a melting pot, but the melting pot also transformed quickly into a compromised religion with mixed religion intertwined together.
Right, right. So therein is some of the basics of the relationship between the Samaritans and the Jews. In fact, the Samaritans and the Israelites, the Samaritans themselves were mixed Israelites, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That there,
Our historian, Michael Davis, tell us.
there is some truth to that. When the Assyrians depopulated Israel, as a matter of fact, God had warned the Israelites what was going to happen if they didn't behave. The prophets told them what was going to happen. And so when the Assyrians came in, they depopulated that area and brought in people from other lands, not just from Assyria, but from the other lands around them. So Israel had a small remnant of Jews that were living there, and then the majority of folks who came in were loyalists to the Assyrians. The Assyrians didn't want to put in people that were not loyal to them, so they brought in a flood of people. Those were the people that intermingled now with the Jews and interbreeding with them that became the Samaritans.
Interesting,
And,
interesting.
and that is found in 2 Kings chapter 17, verses 1 through 41.
Right, right. Okay. So there was the Northern Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom. That was in the time of King Jeroboam. Jeroboam, the son of Solomon, came into power. He thought he was a young fellow. He had his posse that was telling him, "Hey, you need to show yourself strong by, putting pressure on the people." So he taxed them some more. The people got up in arms. The old wise counsel of Solomon was telling this young king, no, don't do that. Take it easy on the people. And but Jeroboam and his entourage says, well, no, I mean, I've got to show my strength here. And so there's a rift, and primarily about taxation. About 11 tribes went to the Northern Kingdom. 2 came back, which was the Benjamites and the Levites, because the Levites' purpose was in the temple, and the temple was in Jerusalem, which is the Southern Kingdom. So they came back, and so we had a small group in the Southern Kingdom, and the larger Israel was dispersed northern. And they intermingled, as you said, and that's what we have. But the Samaritans knew their roots. And so when Judah was taken into captivity, the Samaritans were taken over. And we can look here at, let's look and see a little bit of that history. We see here that the Judeans came into Babylon in exile. They returned to Jerusalem to find Samaritans and Ammonites in occupation. The Samaritans did not want the Judeans to gain power. So you remember the story of in Ezra and Nehemiah, we read of Samaria opposing the temple rebuilding and then again rebuilding of city wall. In fact, it took quite a long time to build up the temple back again after they came out of exile because of the resistance they got. And so in the city of Sychar in Samaria was Jacob's well, where Jesus met the Samaritan woman. So you can find as we go down the lesson in John 4:20, it says, our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we must worship is in Jerusalem. And this mountain, of course, referred to the Mount Gerizim in the Samaritan highlands, where the Samaritans had built their own temple, which they considered the true temple of God. The temple on the Mount of Gerizim was destroyed by the Jews in 129 BC. So, that didn't make the relationship any better. And then the Jews resented the Samaritans because of their merging of everything. They merged, their race, and they also merged their religion. In fact, once they went into a pagan area, they adopted some of the religious practices. So there was an amalgamation of, what should we say?
But let's keep in mind that the religion they brought over was still also somehow rooted in the history of the Jews, because if you look at the Mount Gerizim, was actually the mount where Moses pronounces and pronounces the big speech where there was they had to make a choice, and there was the Gerizim and the Ebal Mount. That's if you're in the valley of the Sychar city where it happens. These are the two big mounts you have. You have one on the north and you have one on the south, and
Correct.
these are the two mountains you see from there. So she was, even though she had a mixed religion, she was still referring to the Jacob well.
Same Jacob, the same, they had the same.
Where Moses pronounces his famous speech. So they were rooted, but they mixed this with many other things.
Right. And this is in fact some of the things that the Jews resented. I mean, you're not true in religion, you're not true in race, and that also harkens to how the Jews thought themselves as so special, even racially. So much so that other people couldn't really truly join their family, right? But these are two fighting families. If you think about, for example, some of the longest rifts and some of the longest battles and altercations are between families. You think of the famous McCoy and Hatfield feud in Kentucky, Tennessee, in the U.S. For about 35 years, there's a feud just between two families that lasted forever. There was just, and it's infamous actually. People killed other people and all that. It was known and all that sort of stuff. So these things do tend to happen in life, and we now know that a lot of resentment had to do with the fact that the Jews knew that the Samaritans were related to them.
Yeah.
All right. So let's look at the setting for the encounter, which we find in John 4:1-4, right? And somebody could read that for me. It's in here.
Yeah. So therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But he needed to go through Samaria, as you showed before. But actually he needed to go through, but many Jews actually went through the east in order to avoid Samaria. That's not what he did, right? That's not what he decided to go through.
So the disciples, pretty much, Jesus was going to go take a straight route. The disciple says, no, that's not our usual route.
Yeah.
We want to actually, we don't really want to go to that heathen place, that place that brings back so much memories, the people that we have a feud with.
So it's interesting to note, because we'll compare this to the end of the story, that he had to leave Judea because he was so badly, he was not welcome there. so that it was becoming a risky area for him. So he went back to Galilee. That was a bit less risky for him because the Jewish leaders were mainly in the south around Jerusalem. So he was threatened and definitely not welcome with the Jews. So that's important to take this as a starting point.
Well, I think if I may add, there was a lot of moving parts as to why Jesus felt it was necessary to go up north. And of course, he went through Samaria. But of course, in that context, we also have some bit of tension between the disciples of Jesus and the disciples of John the Baptist. We also had an issue, and so the Pharisees exploited that, okay? You also had some, as you mentioned, some friction between the Pharisees themselves and Jesus. Okay, so there was a lot of moving parts there, and Jesus felt that some of the friction was unnecessary. I mean, he didn't want to have to deal with that at this particular point, right?
It was too
yes,
early,
but not now.
Too early.
How was that?
It was too early, actually.
Yes. So he thought, okay, let me diffuse it by moving north for a little bit. So there was a lot of things happening, a lot of friction there. Yeah.
Right. And all this thing, because there were also the followers of Jesus and the followers of John the Baptist.
Absolutely.
That started to sort of comparing.
Correct.
And
and competing.
And competing.
Yes.
But I think it's a lesson for us. I think it's a great lesson for us because he wanted to give a lesson to the disciples. When you start to actually compete and create tension within your own community, you better look outside, and he will make them look outside, that there is so much to do outside instead of actually fighting inside, which is a lesson for us as a church.
Yes.
Right. And as we're talking about all that, we look at today, for example, with Plantation Church, that we designate one Sabbath out of the month where we just focus on connections. We just focus on knowing each other. We focus on engendering communication and connection between groups, not the happy Sabbath type of connection that we have at church where we don't know people.
Yes.
We literally go and we actually even come to church dressed a little relaxed as well, in preparation of just meeting people and interacting with people.
Absolutely.
People and connections being the key.
Totally agree with that.
And so we do that. And today is actually Connection Sabbath. If anybody was thinking whether they should come to Plantation or not, I say, come on for the second service, which starts at 11:30. But that's my plug for Plantation. Anyway, so as we go on, we then see that Jesus knew he had a purpose. It would seem so from his insistence of going directly through the land that Jews just did not travel. And that was as he was going to meet the woman at the well. So let's look at what John 4:7-15 says with regards to that encounter.
Can we try to summarize? So there was a woman that came over, but there was a number of barriers for Jesus to actually have any reason to talk or to interface with that woman. And discussed, there was a major barrier for this was indeed their culture and their religion and their history between the Samaritans and the Jew. But there was also a race challenge. But the other barrier, which we sometimes ignore, there was also a gender challenge. And a woman would not talk in the street. Even a man would not talk to a woman in the street, even if it's his own wife. Not to say a teacher or religious leader. This would be even, nobody would have ever heard of a religious leader. If he wants to protect his audience and his authority, this is the last thing he would do, is to talk to an unknown woman on the street. But I think, so we see how many barriers there would be for Jesus to actually have an encounter with a woman. But I think the biggest barrier was actually the disciples themselves. And for me, it's a great lesson for me. Am I a barrier to reach out? Because so what he had to do, which is a little bit sad, he had to send them to the city, and I guess we'll read it. He has to send them to the city before even starting to talk to that woman.
I think,
Wow.
if I may add, Mike, I think this encounter with a woman requires even deeper study because, yes, Luke, you mentioned about barriers. There were some impenetrable barriers that the Jews had. They had custom, they had history, and Judaism itself, perhaps even the religion of the Samaritans, were highly sectarian. So it wasn't difficult for them to exist in that sectarian environment. But I think what really jumped out at me was that Jesus did not focus upon what separated them. Jesus focused upon what they had in common. Everybody needs water.
Mm.
You understand what I'm saying to you? So the first thing that he said to her was not a matter of what separated the two people, but what they had in common. And so that was the lesson for me. Focus upon what we have in common to break the bridges. There is a statement in Hebrew, Gesharem Lamahan Hashalom, which means bridges for peace. So that is what Jesus was focusing upon, the bridges between them, and not the walls around them.
Correct. And not any bridges, not any bridges. I mean, I know in Florida, we don't feel that, but I've been living in places where you are lacking water. This lady has done almost a mile to get for the water. So the well is a place of life because without water, you just die.
Correct.
This is really the only area where you have to go. That's probably the only time she had to go outside of her home every day. So he's using a bridge, not anything. He's using the place where you can take life. The source of life is there. And for both of them, actually, he was thirsty. So he also put himself as vulnerable to show that he also needed, like her, she needed that water, but he also needs that.
Right.
I think
It
also
was
the
a memorable
context.
place too.
Yes.
Jacob's well.
Yes, and the context was when he left Judea, it was about 30 miles from Judea to Shechem or Sychar. Sychar is now or became what is Shechem, which is right on the eastern side between those two mountains, Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. So there today you have the city of Nablus. So all of these things are almost intertwined. You do still find the ruins of Sychar there and Shechem, but they're so intertwined. So it was about 30, and Jesus got there at about noon in the middle of the day, hot. So he was thirsty. And he said, give me water. She a Samaritan and he a Jew. And when she looked at him, she said, really? Go ahead, sir.
Let's read the text and see what it says. All right. Says here in John 4:7-15, says, a woman of Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, give me a drink. For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Then the woman of Samaria said to him, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. The woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw with and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? Jesus answered and said to her, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up into everlasting life. The woman said to him, sir, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw. Interesting.
So the first thing we can detect is that this living place where they have the well is also a place where people meet at some point. But there were only two. How come there were only two? It was noontime. It's the hottest time of the day. Nobody would actually go there at lunchtime, at noon. This was, people usually go there at the fall of the day, at sundown, because it's much less warm. So why would she come there? She come there at that time because she's almost sure to meet nobody. So I think
That's
it's
correct.
important that
Yes.
it's
Her
interesting that
lifestyle.
because
Mhm.
we would say Nicodemus went at night to see Jesus. That's what we study, because it was a time nobody would see him. And surprisingly here, she went at noon because there's a time nobody would see her. And that's, she was also trying to escape from the crowd.
Avoid the
Right.
crowd. But
Yeah.
one of the things I learned from, if you notice the way that he spoke with her, he used an approach that I'm learning from. Perhaps we can. The first thing that he did was he got her attention
Mhm.
by asking for water. Okay? So he got her attention first. Then he aroused her interest in
Curiosity.
living water.
Yes.
You understand?
Mhm.
So he went from attention to interest. And after that, he awakened in her the desire and request for the living water. So there was a pattern. There was
Right.
a deliberate approach in which he was able to reach her, going beyond the erected walls between Jews and Samaritans. But the first thing that he had to do was to get her attention.
Right.
Correct. But I think it's really, this text is really a marvelous piece of how communication can go. You know, we usually classify communication in 5 levels, from the casual conversation to the top level being the revealing of yourself. And in like maybe 10 minutes, he went from the casual conversation all the way to the top, which never happened. It's amazing. And the first level, in order for this to happen, he starts by showing himself vulnerable. If I'm asking water, it means I am vulnerable. I have a need. If I start by saying by coming as a teacher, I mean, you're not going anywhere. But he's just putting himself as needing help.
Because that's what it was. The Jews, who considered themselves so much purer and holier than the Samaritans, were always sort of lecturing the others, right? So if he came from a position of lecturing, then she wouldn't have been as receptive. This would be just another Jew, correct? And so, and we notice again that there must be a reason why, like Nicodemus, she came at a time when there was nobody else at the well, right? And we'll see in a little while. But this also harkens back to the living water that was spoken of. Jesus himself is quoting scripture to a certain extent.
Correct.
You know, we look at Ezekiel 36, verse 25 to 27, and let's see that. And it says, you know, then I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you shall be clean. I will cleanse you from all your filthiness and from all your idols. I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit within you. I will take the heart of stone out of your flesh and give you a heart of flesh. I will put my spirit within you and cause you to walk in my statutes, and you will keep my judgments and do them. There's so much there that applied to the Samaritan woman in this. Jesus was actually carrying out a task, a biblical task.
That is correct.
You know,
that's correct.
To do this, I will give you a new heart. He was following the God principle. And here it says, and cleanse you from the filthiness from all your idols, because along with the Jewishness of the Samaritans, there was also the idolatry of the pagans.
That's true. That's true. And not only that, if we look at Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 13, God, Jehovah God, refers to himself as the fountain of living waters. You understand what I'm saying to you? So when Jesus said that this drink that I will give you, you will never thirst again, that was connected to that Old Testament prophecy where God the Father refers to himself as the fountain of living waters. That's important for us also to understand.
I think we can also stop on I give you new hearts, as you mentioned. I think in some texts it's I create in you a new heart. It's Baha, which is the creation from nothing. So the Jews' mindset was I will gradually transform your heart little piece by piece. No, I will give you a new heart. So he will create in me the desire and the new heart. So this is his power. So I think it's
Right.
it's very important. That's why he could talk to that woman.
Yeah, so that's the creative power of God. Basically, he was there sort of inadvertently declaring himself to be the creator, right?
Yes.
Just like he did with the blind man when he used the method, not the method of just speaking the word, but when he actually took his bit, used the soil, the ground, the earth, and put it on the man's eyes. It was creating eyes for the man. It was literally created because he was born without sight. Therefore, all the facilities and all the mechanics necessary for him to see, even if you could have put in a sort of optic part, maybe the eyeball. There's still nerves. There's still all these things that needed to be done, and all that had to be created at a time. So Jesus here and there is actually giving hints at who he really is, right? And of course, this is curious to the woman because nobody has ever spoken to her like this before and approached her and actually engaged her, meaning that they cared, meaning that they said, she's not just somebody that we pass by, especially if we know her lifestyle. And we're going to look now at what really brought her to the well at this time of the day. As we look at Wednesdays, the revelation of Jesus, we look at John 4:16-24. So somebody can help me read that one.
Where are you? John chapter what?
John 4:16-24.
All right. I have it. And then Jesus said, "Go and call your husband and come here." And the woman answered and said, "I have no husband." And Jesus said to her, "You're right about that one. When you said, 'I have no husband,' for you have had 5 husbands, and the one that you are with now is not your husband. You have truly spoken." And the woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshiping on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is a place where one ought to worship." And then Jesus said unto her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. You know what you do worship, for salvation is of the Jews. For the hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And for the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth."
Wow.
And the woman said unto him, "I know that Messiah is coming, who is called the Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." And Jesus said unto her, "I who speak to you am he."
Wow. Good stuff.
So let me ask you a question, Mike. If I could throw this out.
Yes.
What does the woman's request, or what does Jesus's request for the woman's husband's presence have to do with providing her with living water?
He wanted to make sure he's not perceived as number 6, pretending number 6. Because he wanted for her to be clear on why that. And I think he wanted for her to reveal herself.
Right.
You cannot reach Jesus if you're not ready to reveal who you are and the gaps you have in your life. So he tried to address the challenge he has in our life. But I think I'd like to come back to one of the things that you said before, Mike, is our lifestyle. We don't really know our lifestyle because at this time, it was not the woman that was requesting to change husband. She was dumped 5 times. This is what happened to her. She has been dumped 5 times. So maybe it's linked to our lifestyle, maybe not.
Interesting.
But we need to understand that where is she coming from? I'm coming from a place where she has been dumped by all the men that actually she has encountered in her life. So she's coming with a pain, a strong pain. She's worth nothing because she's been dumped 5 times.
That may be true. I certainly understand, and I believe that there's much credence for that. But I want to share with you that when Jesus healed, he had a holistic approach to healing. Number one, on many occasions, he addressed not only the physical and spiritual and the moral dimensions of the individual. I'll give you an example. When he met the woman who was brought to him caught in the act of adultery, we don't know which one was married. It was adultery, yes, but we don't know if she was the married one or the man was the married one. Women back then were not looked upon as equals with men. You understand what I'm saying to you? But Jesus offered her 2 things. Forgiveness was one, and also righteous living. He said, go and sin no more. So he offered her 2 things. When Jesus encountered the man at the pool Bethesda, he offered him also 2 things. He offered him physical healing and then a moral warning. He said, don't go and sin anymore because worse things may happen to you. You understand? So Jesus used a holistic approach. Now, the woman here, Jesus would not have offered her the living waters while not addressing her living standards. That's important to remember. Okay? So when Jesus was going to give her the living water of righteousness, he was not going to overlook her living standards. So while it may be that she was dumped 5 times, we don't know that to be a fact. However, I do believe that what you say have some credence. Her living standards was also important.
Interesting.
But it doesn't say to her, do not sin no more.
No,
Yes,
you're right.
He
You're
said
right.
it to the other lady.
He did. That's true. So I mean, so here we have 2 possibilities where we can say do some a little bit of guessing, a little bit of informed guessing, but in truth, and in fact, there was something there that Jesus was addressing in her that needed to be dealt with. If it was that she was dumped 5 times, can you imagine the pain? Can you imagine how worthless she would have felt? Can you imagine how much she needed to hear some words of affirmation, some words of encouragement, right? Whether it was that she was not living a good lifestyle and whatever it was, or whether it was that she was a victim of just men not just wanting the next woman, she had some pain that also needed to be healed, and it's interesting how that was healed primarily by words, primarily by the right words. And this is really also teaching us how we approach people, how we look at them, and why in many cases we are purposed to meet certain people or to talk to certain people and to give them some of our experiences if we've been through those experiences. Also to step into their shoes, understand where they're coming from, not just give them the law, because that is what we tend to do,
Yeah.
But
what I found perhaps a little difficult to understand was Jesus knew this woman's heart, number one, but he also knew her living arrangements.
Yeah.
Why did he ask for her to go and call her husband, fully well knowing that she had 5 of them? Okay, and the one that she was living with now was not her husband. Okay, why would he have called for that if she was a victim of injustice? I'm just looking at both sides.
I hear you. I hear.
No, I understand. I think it's probably a mix of both, but I think he needed her to express the pain she has gone through. Of course, this pain is mixed up with sin. Of course, it's like
but
us
she's
in our
shuttled.
daily life. But
she's a lesser human being to them in that society.
Correct.
Exactly.
Yes.
But usually we focus on the sin she has done. And I think we forget that whether it's due to sin or not, we don't know. But what we know is she has suffered from it and she's lost hope and she sees herself as a wreck of society because so someone that has been dumped 5 times, whether it's because of a sin or not. And my belief is that it's not too much due to her sin. Why? Because she will be a very powerful witness in her home community. afterward. And if it was only due to sin, I think her message would have been less effective. While if it's due to her pain, that she see a lady that's hiding from the world and suddenly becoming extremely outspoken, extremely able to address men, which were she was hiding before, they can see a fundamental transformation. Now, whether this is linked to sin or not, we don't know. But I think that's why I think in our life, we should not focus on whether the source, the root cause is sin or not. The thing
Interesting. That's what we're doing
with
now.
our pain, and our pain must be addressed. And that's what this lady is coming with.
Right.
Okay.
And that's even what we're doing now. We're trying to figure out who sinned. Just like
Exactly.
that's not the Pharisees, right? But in reality, Jesus is talking about the living water of solution, the living water of healing. And let's look at what her testimony has done. As we look at chapter 4, verse 27 to 29, right? And it says here, and at this point, his disciples came and they marveled that he talked with a woman. Yet no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" The woman then left her water pot, went her way into the city, and said to the men, "Come, see a man who told me all things that I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" That's a question.
What a transformation. This lady hiding from everybody.
No, it goes.
And suddenly she's going to everyone saying something. It's a pivotal change in her life. And that's what people could see. And that's why she's been such a powerful witness.
Yes. And people could see that change actually because they came. You know, it's not that she could have gone to so many places. They could have said, okay, you know, we know this lady. But then they were curious as to that. Not only that, she said, could this be the Christ? Which means she was of the same religion or roughly the same religion as the Jews, looking for that Christ as well. She was not a pagan. And so the Samaritans were not pagan, even though they had some other rituals into that. We have that today. Some religions that have some pagan rituals in it, just to cover all the bases, as it were, right?
Yeah. Can I add one thing? When Jesus, at the end of their small exchange, said, I mean, it's the first time he's expressing to any human beings that he is the Messiah. It's really amazing because he's actually coming with that statement, which after that is feedback. The only other time he actually gave it was to the Jewish leader before his sacrifice, but also to Peter. But he never actually stated so clearly. The first time he's doing it so clearly is with that woman. It's really amazing.
I think for me also, what the thing that really stood out to me was, number one, I compared the story with the woman caught in the act of adultery. Now remember, it was Jesus himself who said that that adultery was the only reason that you could get a divorce. Okay, and that was only for the man, but that was never for women. All right, but he didn't say to the woman that was caught in the act of adultery, he forgave her, but he didn't say, okay, you can't get married anymore. He said, your sins, he said, go and sin no more. Yes. Okay, I'm not going to condemn you. So he did not condemn her. The other thing that came to my mind was how sectarian the religion was. Remember the temple. There was the court of the Gentiles on the outside. They couldn't even set foot on the inside. There was the court of the women. There was the court of the priests, the court of so and so and so forth. Jesus broke down all the walls. He is our peace, who have broken down every wall. And that is what he did with this woman. He broke down all of the walls. He broke down the sectarianism just to be able to reach her. And there's a lesson in that when we are witnessing to others who perhaps don't share our faith. We shouldn't talk about the Sabbath at the beginning. We must reach out for things that we have in common.
You lead with the Sabbath, right?
Yeah, what was that?
You should lead with the Sabbath and just until they get it.
You too should ask for a drink of water.
Yes. Agreed, but still, I think he couldn't go to revealing himself until she acknowledged that she has a need because she has a
Yes.
gap in her life.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's why also he called her, asked her to call her husband, because she needed to know that he knew she had sinned and she has gaps in her life. And even though he's still asking her water, and even though he's proposing her something, which is for us pivotal. Yes, I know who you are. I know your gaps. I know your all your failures. And even though I'm still relying on you and I still need you, this is what made her completely change.
Yeah, I think though that when we're dealing with one another, especially from a witnessing standpoint, we may know about, or if we know about the gaps in the person's life, I think it's important for us to be able to draw them and to understand and to let them understand that with Jesus, he looks at the entire being, not just our physical needs, but also our moral necessities as well, to live a moral life. These things are important. So because we are complex human beings, we have the complexity of both spiritual, moral, physical on numerous levels. So when he dealt with her physical, I'm sorry, not with her physical, but with her spiritual need for the living water, he was saying to her, I'm now moving from one aspect to another aspect. Okay, it's not just enough for me to look at your spiritual needs. Let's now look at your moral needs as well, not her moral failings.
That's correct. And so as we're wrapping up now, as we're looking at the end of where we are now, we have to wrap up this lesson. But this is interesting. The thing is, how does it apply to us? And are we somehow quite similar to some of the things that we are discussing, disseminating, and taking apart? But we tend to fall into that same category. We categorize people and we decide who gets what and who gets priority from who doesn't in terms of even our witnessing. And so we're now looking at, how do I apply that to my witness, living my life, meeting people, understanding that we have to, at the end of the day, show them the path. This is it. Show them the path to healing, show them the path to light, show them the path to knowledge and understanding, show them the path to Jesus. And so it says, as we close, and many of the Samaritans of that city, that's in verse 39 of John 4, many of the Samaritans of that city believed in him because of the word of the woman who testified, he told me all that I ever did. And that's where we end today. I thank you, Mike and Luc, for just shedding so much light on this lesson and the background of it. I hope we can have another exciting discussion as the lessons continue next week. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.